the annual debate is upon us with the arrival or near arrival of All Saints, All Souls, and All Hallows Eve. And with it comes an annoying debate that I'm not going to really get into here. Some Catholics are absolutely against Halloween. Some are so for Halloween that they are indistinguishable from secularists. Most seem to be somewhere in the middle, and that's fine. I'm not going to get into that debate. I will only say, in regards to that debate, perhaps whatever your stance is on it, aside from if you're going to participate in Halloween festivities, don't do anything gross with it. But the other is, whatever your stance is, observe the traditional Catholic observations of All Saints and All Souls and All Hallows Eve, including dressing like saints and the rest of it, but especially praying for the repose of the souls of the dearly departed in purgatory. But there is something going on in Ireland that, because of its ancient pagan roots and the movement away from the faith in that country, there is a predictable desire to fill the void left by Christian traditions and even secularized versions of Christian traditions to restore ancient pagan practices. And so I'm going to show you something here. This is an advertisement for something called a Puka Festival happening in Trim, Ireland. I'm going to play this muted because there is, and I'm only going to play a few seconds of it. Yeah, I know, skull on the screen. I'm only play a few seconds of it, but I'm going to keep it muted because the music is copyrighted with this. But you can see here, I'm just going to play enough of it so you can get the idea of, some of this looks like Halloween, but a lot of this isn't. This is actually a representation of ancient pre-Christian practices. And it goes on like that, with all sorts of super happy, fun time demonic imagery to go with it. Now, again, some people will be like, it's just a Halloween festival. That is not what it is. This is a festival for Samhain, or I'm an American, and because Americans are always right about everything, and especially how to pronounce the King's English, that's sarcasm, by the way. I'm just going to call it Samhain, but that's what this is a festival for. And they do the typical thing here with trying to say that this is where Halloween comes from. It's not. You can make the argument that it is, but remember, secularists will tell us this is where Halloween comes from. And then where Christmas rolls around, they'll give us some, Baskin Robbins 31 flavors of which pagan festival Christmas comes from, and on it goes. But I'm going to show you here. This is from the Irish Society for Christian Civilization. Their headline is the Puka Festival, innocent fun or doorway to secretive practices of the dark arts. Found out you can't use that word on this platform. I know, it's really dumb, but you can't. So to give you an idea what it is, here it is. It is a festival aimed at promoting Ireland as the birthplace of Halloween, which is a lie, on an international level, taking place from October 31st to November 3rd. Note the dates. However, it threatens the Catholic faith and Christian culture of Ireland. The lighting of a Samhain fire, one of the festival's events, is described as a powerful ritual that seeks to bridge the gap between the physical and spiritual worlds and to carry messages to those who have passed before us. Describing the Puka procession in Trim, the Puka website tells you to be prepared to witness shape-shifting spirits and otherworldly creatures emerging to join the revelry. At the Sacred Hill of Ward, participants are asked to prepare an offering for their ancestors. This isn't just putting on costumes and having a silly time. This is explicitly with the purpose of essentially necromancy. That's what it is. Though promoted as something fun and entertaining, dabbling in these practices always has serious consequences. The hidden, unanticipated result of participating in these practices is that a person opens themselves up to activity of evil spirits and unwittingly to the deceptive attraction of other demonic and satanic activity. In this way, a person compromises their own spiritual health and well-being because of some initial voluntary participation in things through which evil spirits can gain entry into their lives. The Catechism of the Churches is clear. All forms of divination are to be rejected. Recourse to Satan or demons, conjuring up the dead, or other practices falsely supposed to unveil the future, consulting horoscopes, astrology, palm reading, interpretation of omens and lots, the phenomena of clairvoyance, and recourse to mediums all conceal a desire for power over time, history, and in the last analysis, other human beings, as well as a wish to consolidate hidden powers. They contradict the honor, respect, and loving fear that we owe to God alone. End quote. And it goes on, telling you that you should not be practicing magic. I don't think I need to tell you that. if you're a Catholic, you shouldn't be doing any of that stuff. But remember, Ireland functionally left the faith. Yes, there are still good Catholics there practicing the faith, and there's a strong but small traditionalist movement in Ireland keeping the embers of the faith alive there. But the country has overtly left the faith. That's just a fact. So that same organization has a petition and a donation portal and all this stuff up. I will tell you where you can go. Really, the Irish Society for Christian Civilizations is really your best bet for this. They have a fundraiser portal. I'll show you what it is. It's all in euros, so I don't even know if an American can donate to it. But it tells you that the Halloween is simply a corruption of the words All Hallows Eve, the day before All Saints' Day. In the 8th century, Pope Gregory III instituted All Saints' Day on November 1st, automatically making October 31st the eve before All Saints. November 2nd is a commemoration of all the faithful departed, which is founded on the Catholic Church's doctrine that those faithful who have not been cleansed from the temporal punishment due to sin and from their attachment to sin cannot enjoy the beatific vision in heaven immediately upon their passing, that they must go to purgatory. But this festival is an attack on Irish values and by extension, an attack on Catholic values. Remember, the culture of Ireland is so heavily informed by the Catholic faith that it becomes incoherent to take and remove the Catholic faith from the culture. And this is an attempt to undermine the country itself. They've got, videos here for more information if you want to do that. But there is this for you here for those who want to donate to their cause. They're putting out a leaflet and getting information out to anybody in the area to not participate. The people who have embraced the sacrifice to Moloch legislatively, or the people who embraced James Martin's parody of holy matrimony in that country, both of which are now legal thanks to the weakness of the church there and because of the problems the church had, very serious problems that discredited the church in the eyes of the world, or at least opened it up to being discredited. This organization is trying to reach out to the people who should know better but don't, for participating in that. If you were to donate to it, again, I'm not getting paid anything to tell you this, but they pay for the printing of the leaflets they'll pass out. They're going to go door to door in surrounding areas, talking to people and giving out their leaflets. They'll pay for meals and coffee needed for their volunteers, pay for fuel, and pay for 2 rosary rallies that they're planning. Although I don't know why you need to pay for rosary rallies. Maybe they need to pay a fee to rent space. This is a nonprofit organization. No one is getting rich off of those efforts. So please, I would ask that you unite prayers from far away for this, as well as the other things you're going to see here, because I have a news video coming for you probably Monday that something like this is going to happen in the US, but much, much, much worse. And when you see it, it won't surprise you at all, especially since the timing of it is just mere weeks away from the increasingly important contest in November. Now, please pray for the efforts of those in Ireland. And while that is happening, the Synod is tackling rather critically important things like insulting women by playing off of a terrible stereotype. Catholic Set posted this on Twitter, and we're going to go to their article from their own website for this. One proposal of the Synod was entrusting women with the ministry of listening, because women know how to listen, and they listen in a different way, and they could do it as a service, as something totally different to the sacrament of confession. These aren't serious people. I'm sorry. The Synod on Synodality is not being run by terribly serious people. That's a wonderful little stereotype that they pushed. I hope it goes well for them. But can you imagine let's say you have a young daughter who wants to get more involved in the life of the church. And so one of your numerous permanent deacons at your parish, because the only area of growth in the church these days in terms of vocations is to the permanent diaconate. Let's say one of the numerous deacons your parish has approaches your young daughter who wants to get more involved in the church and basically offers her the ministry of listening. I'd be insulted by that. I don't know. Catholic Set has his own Substack, and I'll put links to this in the show notes today at returntotradition.org about an hour after this stream is over. So the headline is SOS Sat Report. Without synodality, there's no chance the church is going to survive. We're going to go over this article in its entirety. This is now the language they're using, and we'll cover this more later in the week, but they're talking about how you have to change the church into the synodal church, otherwise the church is not going to survive. We heard the same nonsense at Vatican II. At Vatican II, they told us explicitly that without these reforms to the church, the Catholic Church was not going to survive. Since the implementation of Vatican II, everything you could possibly chart about church life has gone downhill. If you put it on a line graph, it's a line going straight to the bottom. It craters. Why is that? Pretty straightforward, actually. It's because it should not have happened in the first place. The church was relatively healthy, and they chose to do these so-called reforms, these secularizing reforms, at the same time the culture in the world was embracing sins of the flesh and making them like a normal thing in the lives of everyday Catholics. And they told us at that time we had to do all this stuff for the survival of the church. Well, guess what? Now synodality is being sold to us as a matter of survival for the church. How about they just preach the gospel, catechize the faithful properly, enforce Catholic morality, and you know what? The church will be fine. The article, quote, "The big news at the Synod is that Study Group 5, which is dealing with the question of the female diaconate, is subject to and must follow the dicasteral procedures of the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, unlike the other 9 study groups, because the subject had already been entrusted to the dicastery by the Holy Father prior to the Synod's request, quote, with a view to the publication of an appropriate document. The dicastery, which has already heard from the bishops and cardinals in the regular meetings of the dicastery on the topic, is now in the consultative phase with, quote, the consultors who will provide the basis for the document have already been consulted. However, the rest of the consultation phase is expected to include the views of women who are not consultors. All members and theologians of the Synod can send opinions and aids in the coming months. On the 18th, 2 theologians from the dicastery will be available to receive proposals on the topic in writing or orally. The other major news is that for the first time, a bishop from Cardinal Zen's homeland gave an intervention at the Synod of Bishops. Archbishop Joseph Yang Yongqiang of Hangzhou praised the benefits resulting from the 2018 agreement between the Holy See and that country. So yes, now that extremely questionable government is getting direct influence there because any bishop that has a diocese in that country is approved by that evil, evil government. Just to make you feel better about the Synod. The big topic of the day was ecclesial discernment with interventions touching on subjects and criteria, different levels of responsibility and the role of ordained ministers, the place of laity in selecting candidates to the priesthood and episcopate. One proposal that was mentioned was entrusting women with the ministry of listening. This would be a prominently a women ministry complementing the parish priest, deacon, and catechist. This is an actual quote from the Synod. Quote, "Women know how to listen. And they listen in a different way, and they could do it as a service, as something totally different to confession, the sacrament." Someone had the idea of making those agony aunt newspaper columns from the last century and instituted ministry in the church solely for women. Quote. Can you imagine walking through your parish and seeing, you have your pastor's office. Maybe if you have 2 priests in your parish, you have the associate pastor's office. You have an office for the permanent deacon or deacons. And then you have an office for the catechist, and then there's an office for Dear Abby, basically. That's what this is. Functionally speaking, that's what this is, except it's a person who will sit there and listen to you talk to them. This is a nasty, nasty stereotype of women, and it proves to me that these are people who should not be debating these things, have any influence on these things. Because every time they try to propose something to bring the church up to date with the spirit of the world, it is always cringe-inducing. It makes you laugh reading this nonsense. These people are out of touch with reality, and they're the ones going to be influencing Pope Francis on his final document for the Synod. Doesn't get much better here. Quote, "A proposal was made to entrust young people with the mission of youth pastoral care. Young people, not adults, who act as young people so as to enter into dialogue with their peers trapped in New Age ideologies or nihilism. Topic of children was addressed. One intervention mentioned, quote, children forced into the sacrament of holy matrimony against their will for family interests, young girls who are forced into impure activities, or even worse, seminarians who come from non-Christian families or who are forced into the priesthood by honor, and about children who have to come to terms with their James Martin inclinations. Again, why are they discussing this at the Synod? All of this to say that the aim of the Synod is not to produce documents, but instead to inspire action on these issues. The biggest applause in the Synod Hall was for a mother who, after hearing all the interventions on Christian initiation, 71 in total, was deeply concerned that, quote, there is not enough talk about Christian initiation for the little children, so much so that she asked for words to help to raise them in the Christian faith. This is one of the biggest failures of the Church since Vatican II. Let me pause here and explain what they mean here. There is an attrition rate at the Novus Ordo Mass, the typical diocesan Mass, diocesan parish, of something like 80%, meaning 80%, 8 in 10 children who receive the sacraments, they hit confirmation and then they never come back to Mass, or they don't come back to Mass once they're out of their parents' house, or if they ever do, it's once they start getting more conservative and towards middle age and start rethinking the way they've been living their life. They revert at best. It's 80%. It is one of the main critics traditionalists have of the ordinary form. It's why I won't bring my children up in a Novus Ordo environment, because I saw the statistics and I don't want to take my chances on something that I will be judged for at my judgment. And they don't talk about this. That's what that mother is talking about. How to keep your children Catholic. For whatever reason, the hierarchy does not want to touch this topic at all, because it forces them to face some very serious evidence about the efficacy of their so-called reforms. Here, the article claims that the Church does not foresee the big shift in Western culture, that of women entering the workforce and all this other stuff. They say that that's the reason people leave. Secularism is certainly part of it, but the Church has played kissy face with secularism for 60 years, or even longer, depending on how you look at it. Then the mother asks, what does the assembly say about the role of parents, grandparents, Christian godparents in contributing to synodality on listening and discernment from childhood? We need to raise children so that when they grow up, they will go to Christ. I, meaning the author here, think what has happened is that over the last few decades, parents have relied on the church to do all the work, with the results plain for all to see. That's an indictment, by the way, of the church. And we'll use the church in quotes here, because the church should be able to teach your children the faith. You would think that'd be like one of the most basic things it can do. But it's also an indictment of the church failing to teach people the most basic truths about being parents, which is that the faith is taught in the home. It's taught in the home by your example. It's taught in the home by you taking even a few minutes of the day to teach your children the faith. One of the first things that my, as of today, 3-year-old daughter, it's her birthday, one of the first things she learned to say was, we have a picture of our Lord and Our Lady, an Immaculate Heart and a Sacred Heart image on the wall in our living room. And we would point to Our Lady and say, her name is Mary. We named you after her. That's Jesus's mama. And my daughter just started calling her Jesus Mama. It begins with stuff like that. Okay. Very, 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 very basic things. And of course you build on it from there. And for some reason, people expect their children to be taught everything about the faith in their catechism classes. In the same way that a lot of parents expect the public schools, to teach their children about everything about basic things in life. Everything in your children's life that they're taught is supposed to be taught from you. That's why you're supposed to help them with their homework from school if you take them to public schools, which I do not endorse doing, but I will not negatively judge you for it either. Just know that this is a failure on the part of the church to communicate what it is the duty of Catholic parents. But that's what they were discussing at the Synod recently, turning women into listening ministry. Dear Abby, but in person, basically. And then trying to teach children how to be synodal, because that makes any sense whatsoever. This is, of course, why nobody trusts these people and why nobody trusts the Synod of Synodality with things going on in the church. I'm going to turn now to the live chat here so we can see what is happening in the live chat. Alice says, I was born in 1972. We were taught the Ten Commandments, and that was about it. Right. This is not a new problem. Catholic Benaiah says, people need to fear the Lord. The problem is the secular world looks appealing, but it's all a facade. Proper catechism and apologetics is what is needed. And I think proper catechism is needed more than even apologetics. Because most apologetics are designed to defend your faith against Protestants or to argue with Protestants, right? Definitely a place for that. Definitely. There's some really good YouTube channels out there for that stuff, and not counter-signaling them in the slightest. But the faith begins in the home. And the education of the faith begins in the home. Traditional Catholic says kids aren't going to stay Catholic being raised with bad catechesis and liberal Catholicism. That's also true. There's a fairly traditional appearing monastery near where I live. Love the monks there. They're great people. But if you go to their ordinary form masses are fairly reverent. They're in the vernacular and they're versus populum, but they're fairly reverent in the way they do their ordinary form masses. But when it gets to the prayers of the faithful, it becomes all of a sudden like all the left-wing political issues of the day being offered as prayers for the faithful. I mean, seriously. So again, any other final thoughts in the comments before we wrap this up? Got birthday stuff for my kids to prepare for today. Hardly anything good left in pop culture. This is what children imbibe. Yeah, I mean, that's why you got to screen everything for your kids at the end of the day. Catholic Arrow says government education equals worshiping the earth and hating yourself. Basically. I mean, that's basically what it is. What's wrong with the Baltimore Catechism? Depending who you ask, nothing. There are some who will point out that when the Baltimore Catechism was released, it was considered a very liberal catechism for its day. This is why traditionalists typically say, yeah, Baltimore Catechism is definitely better than what we have today, because what we have today is thick, covers way too much, and isn't intuitive like previous catechisms were. But a lot will say also read the Catechism of Trent or the Catechism of Pius X, which was just the Catechism of Trent updated for the early 20th century. Read those and have Baltimore Catechism. Those are much better than what we have today. And the current Catechism of the Catholic Church was said by the cardinals who put it together that it was not good. After they spent years and millions of dollars putting it together for John Paul II, they said it was not a good catechism and that it would need to be fixed in the future. That's what they said. All right, folks, any final thoughts in this, please? If not, please pray for what's going on in Ireland. Pray for the faith to be restored in Ireland, really. And keep we are approaching All Saints Day, All Hallows Eve, All Souls. Keep the traditional practices around those days, please do so. And I'm always disappointed. The best thing I think that Pope Francis ever did was extend the indulgences you can gain for praying for the repose of souls at that time. He, at one point, extended it for the entire year, or not the entire year, the entire month of November. That was like the best thing he ever did, honestly, because Catholics do not spend enough time praying for the holy souls in purgatory, and especially the souls in purgatory who have no one to pray for them. We don't spend enough time doing that, and I wish he would do that again. Super chat from Catholic Arrow says, God bless you, Dr. Stine. Well, thank you very much for the support, Catholic Arrows. All right, folks, thanks very much for tuning in today. And as always, pray for the church, pray for Catholic Ireland to become Catholic once again. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.